Welcome to Crypto in America Live, the only show bringing you candid conversations on the biggest news stories, legal issues, and policy developments shaping the crypto world every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Jacqueline's back from Singapore. We're finally back to three co-hosts on the live show. Welcome back, Jack.
Thanks. It's nice to be back in the States. I did the world's longest flight yesterday. It was 19 hours. It actually was not as bad as it sounds. Just
Are you sure about that?
I mean, in the grand scheme, yeah, it's bad, but like it could have been worse. Could have been worse. But I'm glad to be back, and thank you guys for taking on the show last week, even though we talked before.
Yeah, no, it was good to catch up with you with the Korea blockchain conference that you did. Just quickly catching up, how was the Singapore conference? I know you did a panel there. Yeah, just a quick check-in. How did that go?
So I did a panel with Paulo from Tether, Charles from Paxos. They're both CEOs of their companies, and then Rob from Dragonfly, who was a partner there. It was a good conversation. Obviously, it was all about stablecoins, and we talked about kind of like the use cases there. Paulo really dove in on like emerging markets. I asked him about the raise. He just said it was really to scale operations. And then he said they're not going to IPO for a while. He said that's not at the top of mind right now. And I remember last time you spoke to him, Ellie, at the USAT launch event, he said they weren't going to IPO. Right. TBD.
TBD. All right. Well, we do have a packed show today, and I want to get everything in. So let's get to a little preview of who we have coming up for you all today. We have Stacey Rolland. She's the founder of government relations firm 01 Strategies. And we have Miller Whitehouse-Levine. He's the founder and CEO of Solana Policy Institute. But before we get to our conversations with Stacey and Miller, we're going to get to our top stories of the week. And we're going to kick off the conversation with probably the biggest one, which was the White House dropping the nomination of Brian Quintenz, the CFTC nominee, who was and is no longer. I think we all saw this coming. Probably not too much to add in terms of news here, but this happened on Tuesday evening. A lot of the crypto industry were maybe expecting this. There had not been any word from the White House since that initial statement after they'd pulled his confirmation vote before the August recess. And then obviously we had all the drama with the back and forth with the Winklevoss twins. There's been some concern over Quintenz's connections to his old firm A16Z and the sitting on the board of Kalshi. So all of this kind of culminated in what we saw Tuesday evening, which was the pulling of the nomination. I did reach out to Quintenz on Tuesday evening. Politico was obviously the one who got the story first, but I believe I got Brian's statement first, and you guys can see it there, basically, thanking the president and the Senate Ag Committee. I guess we could call that an exclusive, was me getting the statement. But he said he's looking forward to returning to the private sector and his endeavors during this exciting time for innovation in our country. I don't know if you guys have anything to add on to that. I wonder, Gerald, if he'll go back to A16Z.
Yeah. So first of all, happy Uptober. It is sweater weather officially to everyone. Very excited. It is Friday, so I know we're going to do this and then we're going to have the weekend. First of all, I think obviously shout out to Brian on how gracefully he sort of handled this entire process. I know a lot of people had thoughts on the text that he released between him and the Winklevi, sort of detailing what he thought, was maybe not the most appropriate interaction. And then, as far as what's next for him, I'm sure he'll have options. We were talking a bit earlier this week about the notion that maybe the role that he held is not sort of still open at Andreessen. Obviously, Miles Jennings, friend of the show, sort of stepped into that head of policy spot. And then they obviously also have former Chair McHenry in a policy advisor role. So I know there will be someone out there who wants to pick up his skill set and everything that he's great at, but we'll keep our eyes open. I think also it was interesting to me how quickly we started to see Mike Selig's name pop up on crypto Twitter. I know a lot of the industry folks, some of the folks, trade associations, putting out that he would make a great head, and so it'll be interesting to see where that process goes. We know this administration loves to run kind of apprentice style sort of nomination processes. So we'll see where it goes.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious for both of you from your perspectives, especially with Ellie, as you watch this unfold and you've been telling the story through the Crypto in America newsletter. What do you think was kind of like the nail in the coffin, or was there really no nail in the coffin and it was kind of just like a slow burn?
Well, I think the emails that we saw were sort of the catalyst, right? We saw the emails that allegedly Brian's chief of staff or would-be chief of staff, had he been confirmed, reached out to the CFTC looking for more information to help, accelerate Brian's confirmation process. That information was allegedly, not confirmed. What is it? What's the word I'm looking for, guys? Confidential. There we go. Confidential information. And thank you. There we go. Ellie's brain is working on a Friday. So I think, that and, sort of the optics around that, whether that was, it was such a complicated and I think a thorny issue. We could spend an entire episode talking about it. But then, the press fight between the Winklevoss twins and Brian kind of came out and shared some personal messages with Tyler Winklevoss. But it's interesting, right? Because I think the industry really came out and rallied behind him. You saw that industry letter. And also we saw on Tuesday when we saw the withdrawal, a lot of people came out and said, this is really disappointing. Brian, we thought was the best person for the job, and, kind of wasted 8 months on, expectations being set that it was going to be this person and now it's going to be someone completely different. So to Gerald's point, I think, if it's someone like Mike, if it's someone like, the other candidates that are being floated, Jill Summers is a former CFTC commissioner, there are other people who will do a good job. It's just, when you're expecting one thing and you get something else, it's like, okay, now we have to kind of like, reset expectations. But let's get on to the next one. The SEC, which was a big story this week, they actually issued 2 no action letters, but I think the bigger one of the 2 was the okaying state custodians, state chartered trusts to be able to hold crypto assets, right? Basically allowing these state chartered trust companies to qualify as custodians. And before, you had to have a national bank charter. And it's basically opened up the playing field for companies like Gemini, Coinbase, Ripple, Wisdom Tree funds to be qualified custodians. So these other registered funds can kind of look at them and say, okay, we can use them without fear of getting sued. So it was this no action letter, but it actually, it kind of opens up the playing field a little bit more to these TradFi registered funds who are saying, okay, we want more options than just sort of the regular banks. But yeah, I don't know about you guys. That's a pretty big development. I think the industry was pretty excited to see that.
Yeah, I think I got to give graphics intern just absolutely killing it here. Whatever's going on.
Logos, yeah.
It was incredible. No, I think, look, we've talked before on the show about how many regulators there are involved with custody. And so to see the SEC step in and take a no action letter position, allowing these firms to not bypass the federal charter process, but to at least get some comfort that they would be able to operate, because up until now, it really just been Anchorage with that sort of federal charter. And then I think it's like 7 or 8 pending, right? So good progress there. And then I will just shout out, obviously, the other no action letter was a pretty big deal on 00. Congrats to that team. And
what does that mean exactly, Gerald? You can probably speak to that more eloquently.
Yes. So no, there's been a few good breakdowns, but no action essentially means that the way your token is being issued, the SEC does not see as meeting the criteria of the Howey test. And so also shout out Rodrigo and Derek over at Cooley, very bright guys who represented 00 as a client here in the interactions with the SEC. Basically, what you're looking for is a path forward to say, look, this is how my token is going to work. Are you going to leave me alone if I do what I say I'm going to do? And so it's not a legally binding precedent. It's not something that, is sort of like a court case where nobody can ever sort of change their mind. But it is a huge win for DPIN and for kind of programmatic token sales more broadly, because the SEC is kind of following through on the notion that they were going to stop coming after those types of launches in the industry. So yeah, good to see.
Yeah. I think also it kind of points to just the, transparency that we're starting to get and like guidelines. Whereas like in the past, if people are issuing tokens, they probably didn't really want it to be stateside or anything on that nature. But now that we're kind of getting these like no action letters, it's maybe making people more comfortable, I would hope.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that was a big theme about the roundtable on Monday with the SEC and the CFTC. It's all about coordination and making the space feel more comfortable to be able to innovate here. Because for so long, as we all know, lots of people felt they had to leave the States and go elsewhere. Let's get to story number 3. Adrienne Harris, she's the superintendent of the New York Department of Financial Services. She is set to leave her position after 4 years in the role. She's basically New York's top crypto regulator, right? The New York Department of Financial Services, they're known for being quite a stringent regulator. They have the BIT license, which is notoriously difficult for any crypto company to get. It's a license you have to get in order to operate within New York State. But Adrienne Harris, I mean, you guys probably have seen her at crypto conferences, right? She comes on the circuit quite a bit to talk, and I think she's pretty approachable to industry players. But I think nonetheless, I'm sure people are maybe wondering who's going to be her permanent replacement. Kathy Hochul has put an interim person in there who starts on October 18th. But it'll be curious to see who takes over her place full time and kind of what the New York Department of Financial Services evolves into, if it evolves into anything at all. Because I'd say it's like, would you call it pro crypto, Gerald? I'm not sure if that's the right term to use, but
no, I would not call it pro crypto.
Oh, okay.
No, things, yeah.
I think it's part of this like bigger shift in New York more broadly that you're seeing, right? So there's an election year. I think the president has been very involved in New York, obviously for his entire life, but seems to have taken a particular interest sort of more recently in what I'll call local politics. So we saw Eric Adams, who had the support of the president, drop out of the mayoral race. We've seen all the Mamdani madness on the mayoral trail. And then I think just this change at DFS, hopefully the industry has put a lot of capital and a lot of labor into New York City as kind of almost replacing the Bay as, the hub for this kind of technology. So hopefully we'll get someone in there who understands the industry, who sort of matches federal enthusiasm for these products, but we'll see how it goes. And then we'll obviously see where, Harris lands next.
Yeah. And to your point, actually, well, it's Governor Hochul who appoints. So
right.
Yeah, unclear what Governor Hochul's position on crypto is. I imagine it's probably not pro, but I guess we'll have to see. All right. And then the last one, Shutdown having an effect on crypto ETFs, which is what I wrote about in my newsletter today. Essentially, what I understand is that the SEC is operating on a skeleton crew right now, and any potential ETF approvals that we might have seen this week coming into, the coming weeks, we're supposed to see a Litecoin ETF approval on Thursday and potential Solana ETF approvals next week or the week after. With this shutdown, because the staff is just, most of them are furloughed right now, as I understand it. It's just probably not going to happen. The S1s have to get the green light. Gerald, we talked to Greg Exathalis last week or the week before about the generic listing standards, and actually what those have done, they've taken away the 19B4s, so those deadlines on those ETFs no longer really matter. So like Litecoin had the deadline on Thursday, but because everyone's kind of filed under that generic listing standard, the deadlines matter less, and they can kind of be approved if they get cleared under those standards. They can be approved on a rolling basis. But yeah, with the shutdown, I'm pretty sure everything, as Eric Balchunas said, is on ice right now. Yeah.
Must be. I was gonna say it must be nice for governments to just be able to shut down. Imagine if we did that with our day jobs.
Well, I don't know that's voluntary, but yeah. I think no, it's challenging because it is like the SEC's work is a major sort of unforeseen, particularly for the industry, kind of repercussion of the shutdown more broadly. And I know we're going to talk to Stacey about this. So there's people who are essential and people who can stay in their roles. And then there's people who are deemed non-essential and can't come to work even if they want to. So you're looking at like even talking about no action letters, right? So there's no audience if you were pursuing that strategy. There's nobody at the CFTC or the SEC. I think I saw that after furloughs, there's something like 41 people currently still on staff at the CFTC, right? Something like that. Ellie, we were talking about that. Like, so it's skeleton crew. And so, we'll see how much of this actually holds up for the industry, because it's a very bad time to be.
Yeah. Well, Totally. Just bad timing. Let's bring in Stacey now because she is the expert on this. Stacey is the founder of 01 Strategies. It's a government relations firm focused on federal policy and emerging tech. Stacey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So we're on
a bummer of a topic, though.
I know. I was going to say we're on day 3 of the shutdown, but I think a lot of people don't really understand sort of what's going on. Obviously, we've had shutdowns before. I was on Capitol Hill yesterday. There were still people working. Some agencies are still open, but, like we talked about, operating on skeleton crews. So, you've had so much experience, with these shutdowns in your work on the Hill. And just, can you tell us what's going on really? What's the crux of all this about?
Yeah. Well, obviously every shutdown is political, right? And the reason for every shutdown, totally different. So this time, like in 2013, we're back to talking about the ACA and Obamacare. The Republicans want a clean CR, right? So what a CR, it's a continuing resolution. It's temporarily funding the government outside the regular appropriations process. And the House Republicans passed a bill last week that would extend the CR through November 21st. So it essentially just funds the government for a few more weeks. However, this is leverage, right? The Democrats want to extend the ACA enhancement tax credits. Those are tax credits that were passed in 2021 as part of our COVID recovery response, and it made ACA the Obamacare premiums more affordable for low-income people. Those enhancements expire at the end of this year. So that is one issue. The Democrats want to use this shutdown, the continuing resolution, as leverage to try to continue to provide these enhanced tax credits to everyday Americans. But there's also a second issue here, and it's a constitutional issue. They are also very concerned about the OMB and the director of OMB, Russ Vought's use of what's called a pocket rescission. And so what we have seen, and it's slightly unprecedented, that Congress constitutionally has the power of the purse and decides where money goes, right? And so what OMB has been doing is deciding to withhold funding from some places. So we can talk about why those things are critical at this moment. One is that the ACA open enrollment starts on November 1st. So about a week before, so in about a week and a half, people are going to log on and start shopping. And insurance providers have already baked in the loss of these enhanced tax credits. So there's a possibility that everyday Americans are going to log in and see higher premiums for the same plans. And obviously, both Democrats and Republicans are worried about the optics of that. And then there's the overall, constitutional worries about what it means when the executive branch starts to encroach more and more on congressional power.
Mm-hmm. Stacey, I'd love to get your take as well on kind of the more crypto-centric policy effect of the shutdown in Washington. What does this mean for the industry? I know we talked a bit about the SEC front before. Kind of give us your take on where everything is right now.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, crypto is in a lot of different places, right? And so we spent time on the SEC. Let's dig in for a second, a little deeper on what exactly the SEC can do, it can't do. What I think is really helpful for everybody, if you're that interested, you want to nerd out on shutdowns, every agency posts their shutdown plan online. So in August, the SEC did post their plan, and so it's right there for everybody to see. They had reported that out of the 4,289 full-time employees at the SEC, they would plan to keep as essential about 393, right? So a significant portion of the SEC employees are currently furloughed. They detail that systems are still in place because they're already under contract. So things like Edgar are going to continue. They've got the skeleton crew that are accepting complaints and sort of regular tips. They will handle emergencies. So really the way to think about it is the work an emergency? Then there's 393 people there to handle that emergency. Otherwise, it's not happening. They're not processing filings. They're not providing interpretive guidance, and they're not conducting like sort of normal duties of the agency, and it's right on their website.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, places like the IRS are, there's still work to be done on crypto in the tax space. They are fully functional until December 6th, and then it is unclear what exactly, what percentage of people will be furloughed from there. There's also in Congress like issues that are related to crypto that I am sure that crypto companies are watching very closely. One is cybersecurity. There's a major cybersecurity law that already lapsed, and the shutdown will obviously impact the negotiations to try to extend that. There are concerns about emerging tech in the NDAA. Negotiations on the NDAA are incredibly timely, and there are major deadlines there. And so Congress is, and we can talk about the difference between this shutdown and previous shutdowns, but it's a major, I'm not going to call it a distraction because it's obviously very important to people, but it's taking up a lot of attention and a lot of time that would otherwise be focused on these issues that are important to our industry.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see the effects of it just literally being in DC, right? I was talking to someone on Tuesday night about sort of the impact of, as Ellie was mentioning, people are still sort of, around the Capitol and in that space, but also like coffee shops and pizza shops are going to get taken over by folks with laptops for the next few weeks. So it's not like we're doing nothing, but we're definitely not getting anything done. And so on that note, we were on the Hill on Tuesday with the Blockchain Association talking to folks about tax, which is feeling like kind of the last frontier here. And I was not getting super optimistic vibes from folks about when we could actually get something done, right? And this shutdown seems to have curtailed our ability to move forward on some of that, at least from a legislative perspective. And, you mentioned the IRS is hanging out until December 6th, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah. It was also one of the last things the federal government actually did before shaking down was having that Senate hearing, right? So what are your thoughts on where we are with tax and where we go from here?
Yeah, well, honestly, it's important to think about the Senate finance hearing was actually on the first day of the shutdown, which I thought was very telling about how Congress was approaching this shutdown, unlike previous shutdowns where some offices really shut down to, skeleton crew, only handling emergency constituent services. This shutdown, Congress, it seems all, just full steam ahead. They, obviously one of the big considerations here when it comes to a shutdown, and I'll get to your tax question in a second, but it really impacts the work being done, is no one's getting paid. Everyone is working. If you are not furloughed, if you are deemed essential, you are required to work, but you are not collecting pay. Luckily, in 2019, a law was passed that would allow back pay. But as of right now, every federal worker who is working or at home and they're not getting paid. So that will that obviously impacts the vibes. And how enthusiastic people feel as time goes on about negotiating. But, I think, like I said, the digital asset issues are incredibly important. They're, we're seeing it in multiple jurisdictions, across Congress. And I also think certainly for tax staff who were just inundated with the one big beautiful bill and thinking about those issues over the last year or more, and thinking about the Trump tax cuts and just the same issues over and over again, I actually think it's somewhat novel and interesting to be shifting to something new and challenging, right? Like digital asset tax issues, there are sort of two categories of tax issues for crypto. One is places where the tax code could be providing parity. So this is, the IRS is silent on the treatment of digital assets in a certain part of the code, but digital assets are functioning as securities. So we will add the word digital assets to the code to treat them like securities. And then there are other areas where it just doesn't fit at all. And we can try to shoehorn, and it's going to create confusion or compliance challenges for the industry and for taxpayers. So it's sort of, if you're a tax nerd like me, it's really interesting to try to solve some of these challenges.
Stacey, we also have a question from our audience, which
Ooh,
is
fun.
also a reminder to our audience that if you have questions, comments, write them in, and maybe we'll pull them up. This is from Christopher Cavallaro. Could this shutdown push crypto regulations into 2026, or do you think we could still make it by the end of the year?
Oh, it depends on how long this goes. And, historically, this pay period issue is a big deal. And it tends to, when you hear, if you're listening to any coverage about the shutdown, they will say, you start to see dams break, the more pain is felt. But what do we mean by pain? We mean when it starts to get to the point where people are waiting for checks that are coming and they're not getting cut. When people have hit their frustration of working and not getting paid. And what that means is when that first pay period passes. So you tend to see shutdowns, like long shutdowns tend to be 16 days. And that's not a coincidence. It's because day 14 was the day the paycheck was supposed to hit and it didn't. So I think when you talk to staff, there's a major concern about how long this is going to last, because obviously they're worried about paying rent. But think about things like, and this is a tangential way to answer your question, TSA and everyone working at the airport, like the folks who are directing the planes, they're not getting paid. And in previous shutdowns, it was the backup of flights that really was the pain point, where baggage handlers and TSA were done. And so they called in sick. We can see this. We can see this extend.
Is there a military pay date coming up? I believe it's October 15th.
Yeah. So apparently paychecks hit on October 1st, the first day of the pay period. So you'll see, folks got a check. If it had been October, if it had been into the shutdown, we would not have seen them. Pain would have been hitting right now. But no, they're not exempt. They are, the military is not getting paid.
Right. And I heard something about maybe running out of funding by, the second week of October. So it's like, are our troops getting paid? And, that
That's
sort
right.
of, that becomes like a national, a really national, probably emergency at that point, maybe not emergency, but certainly a crisis. So
Sure.
Would you say that might make negotiations heat up at that point?
Yeah, it's hard to predict what the pain point will be, right? Like, is it flights start to stack up because no one is able to direct planes? Is it, right? Like, is it do we have God forbid, a national security crisis? And, here we are asking people to go into harm's way, but we're not paying them, right? Like it's hard to say what that point will be. Will it be, folks going on to the ACA exchanges and seeing prices? It's hard to say what that will be. But there's a group of senators negotiating right now, trying to find that sort of like off ramp. But the split politically is that Republicans are saying, we're willing to hear when the Democrats are ready to come to the table with something reasonable, we're willing to hear them out, but the government has to open first. And Democrats are saying the way we're going to build trust here is you add our demands to the extension. So right now, still an impasse.
Stacey, I have to ask you one more question before I know and really appreciate the time and the insights. There's something, I'll let you tell me if this is actually unique or not, but there is something unique about this shutdown, which is that we're also going to have a gubernatorial election sort of in potentially the midst of this, right? So I believe now the Virginia governor's election is in about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And live voting, early voting has already started. Obviously, Virginia has a huge portion of federal workers, and it's going to be kind of unique to see how this shakes out. Do you think this is going to be any kind of like a partisan referendum, or that's like stepping up, in voters' minds? Like, how does that work?
I don't see how this is not first and foremost on certainly in Northern Virginia, right? And one thing we didn't talk about is the threat of just rifts, right? Of people getting laid off. So what we had in the federal government was you saw Doge come in at the beginning of the Trump administration and have massive layoffs that obviously impacted quite a number of people in Northern Virginia and in the DMV area. Now you have furloughs where you have, families who might have had, one spouse was already laid off and now one is working without pay. And obviously putting pressure on their finances. And now you have, in the last few days, again, Russ Vought, the director of the OMB, and President Trump threatening to use the shutdown to incur further layoffs. And they have said that those could be coming any day. So we could see major layoffs, not just furloughs, but people absolutely losing their jobs and certainly being under threat alone. I don't know how that isn't the top concern for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Stacey, thank you for coming on today. I don't think this will be the last time we're hearing from you, and hopefully we have you back on, and unfortunately, or hopefully on better terms as well.
Please, absolutely. Let's bring good news back.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Next time, Stacey, thank you so much again.
Thanks.
Thanks, Stacey.
And next up, we are bringing on Miller Whitehouse-Levine, the founder and CEO of Solana Policy Institute, which is also one of the sponsors of the show. We're excited to have Miller on today. Miller, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. That
Hey there.
logo looks good down there.
Yeah, exactly. How
How's
are
it
you
going?
doing?
Doing well. Jerry, not on the train this week.
Good to see you. No, yeah.
That was awesome. That was
We're
awesome.
not on the hill today, right? I see your casual Friday gear.
It's casual Friday.
Did you
only
just call
Solana,
him
most in the
Jerry?
office.
We're
I
gonna
know.
call
I
him
know. I
Jerry
call
now.
him Jerry, but I know his name is Gerald. I have a habit of doing that,
It's okay.
unfortunately. I
You're
apologize.
not the first, not the last. Yeah.
All right, Miller, let's get into it. When it comes to policy priorities at SPI, what would you kind of say are the key areas of focus right now until the end of the year?
Well, there is a ton going on in crypto policy. I think our overall focus is accomplishing durable wins. I think our strategy for this administration and this Congress has been let's try and lock in as many durable rules and legislation that we can, such that the industry doesn't experience the whiplash we have had over the last over the change in administration in the opposite direction. Like we need to mitigate the 2029 risk to the extent we can. And the way to do that is to secure durable legislative and regulatory wins. Genius, obviously, is the apotheosis of that, at least successfully this year. Market structure, tax legislation will be important throughout the remainder of this Congress and this year. Gerald, I'm more bullish on tax than it sounds like you are after your conversations this week. I thought the hearing went well. I think in prior Congresses, the Finance Committee in the Senate and the Ways and Means Committee in the House haven't really been engaged on crypto issues to the extent they are this Congress. So there's not the foundation of knowledge on those committees that there has been developed on the banking and finance committees and the ag committees in Congress. So I view this as a very positive foundational work that essentially creates the opportunity or creates the ability for us to seize the opportunity when it arises to get legislation done. We're also very focused on the SEC's agenda. I think the SEC's agenda is perhaps the most ambitious of any agencies I've ever seen, including Gary Gensler's, which might disappoint him. So we're very much looking forward to the SEC promulgating proposed rules, exemptive relief, as Chair Atkins has been talking about for several months. So I think it'll be a busy conclusion to the year, or at least I'm hoping it will be, given the government shutdown. I agree with everyone's assessment that it really has put everything on ice. We've not, as an industry, really dealt with a government shutdown at least in a time when DC is working on crypto policy. So it's been a bit of an education, and a year ago, this would have been probably very welcome for crypto, but am eager to get the government reopened.
Yeah, Miller, you mentioned the tax hearing. Did you guys at SPI think it was a good start? I mean, you mentioned some of these committees like Senate Finance haven't been focusing on issues of digital assets quite as closely as, Senate Banking and Senate Ag. But I'm curious to know your take, because I was kind of sitting in the back room. I was actually the only person at the press table because it was the first day of the government shutdown. But the room was packed. I mean, with attendees, but also, a fair amount of senators came in and asked questions, barring Sheldon Whitehouse's tirade on climate change. I think pretty much everybody stuck to topic, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts were just sort of on the content and the questions that were asked.
Yeah, I thought again it was extremely bullish. I thought it was largely a good faith engagement with the issues. And if you think back to like 2018, 2019, when the first crypto hearings in the financial services committees and the ag committees were occurring, it's in my mind this week's was light years ahead of where other committees were starting. So I thought it was very productive. I saw the House Ways and Means folks were in attendance as well, which is, there's always a House Senate dynamic. So I thought that was encouraging as well. Tax legislation constitutionally has to originate in the House. So I do think it's important, and it's positive that the two chambers are working together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm curious on sort of the broader front. So we were talking about the 0.0 approval a little earlier. Obviously, Austin had his time at the Solana Foundation, and there's a lot of links to 0.0 and Solana. You mentioned the SEC's agenda getting thrown off a bit. Where do you see the challenges coming up in the near term for like ecosystems and what we should expect there? Like how do you think this slowdown will sort of impact whether it's more no action efforts or the ability to engage, the ability of CFTC to staff up? Like where are you seeing the issues there?
Well, everything's just completely on ice at the agencies until the government reopens. So I'm thinking about it as every day the government is closed, it's like adding 2 days to the timeline for all of the industry's priorities. That's everything from no action letters, individual like relief for individual companies, to massive rulemaking efforts. The entire agenda is disrupted by the shutdown. And that's, to not the same extent, but to a large extent, true in Congress as well. The Congress is focused on reopening the government, and crypto policy, becomes a secondary issue next to that. So it's really just put everything on ice. So everything's frozen until the government reopens.
Yeah. How's this got you feeling about the ETFs, Miller? Because, I think that's been a kind of a rallying point, I think, for, Solana, at least retail investors, right? They've been so excited to see the final approval of these Solana spot ETFs. I mean, potentially staking, right, too. There's been a lot of activity, and it's sort of been Solana and XRP have been the two that, the retail crowd has been really pumped up about. So, shutdown or not, you're still hopeful that, the SEC will actually greenlight these things once the shutdown is over?
Yes, 100%. That is my expectation. I expect them to launch with staking, which will be interesting and pretty novel. I was hoping beyond hope. I hate to admit, I stayed up late Monday night hoping that they might squeak them out right before the shutdown, which again was based on nothing other than hopium. So I do expect them to move quickly after the government reopens on all of these products.
Hmm. Miller, I also want to get your take on the Solana side of things. Obviously, the Solana token is doing pretty well. I don't know if you could speak to that, but like as head of SBI, you probably engage with a lot of different people who are looking at the Solana market and or the asset itself. What are you kind of thinking about on that front when it comes to SBI advocating on the policy side with Solana in mind?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's sort of a positive externality of our policy work. We're pursuing policies that are totally tech neutral and explain them through a Solana lens is how I think about them. So, for example, we're working on staking ETPs, but that work will be just as useful to any other network that has staking as a feature. So I think that our work in DC might have a tangential positive externality on folks' understanding of the ecosystem among that audience. I'm such a policy nerd, unfortunately, Jacqueline, that my focus remains here in Washington.
So you don't have price predictions for us?
I have hopefully up is my position,
There we
but no,
go.
I don't. I'd be doing something
There we
else
go.
if I knew which way things were going.
Yeah.
You're like me on that front. I've been on interviews and spaces before, and they're like, "What's your price prediction?" I'm like, "I don't really follow it like that." I also don't own crypto, so I think that's also part of it. It's like I'm not watching my portfolio on like a day-to-day basis. So
Did you
I
just
do
break
that.
news?
I do that.
Eleanor
But
doesn't own crypto. Is that
yeah, come
is that
on.
a scoop?
Oh no, that's
No,
that's
that's not a
unfortunately
scoop.
well known.
Well
Yes,
known.
I've
Yeah.
been trying to get her to get it, but she just hasn't budged.
I was at the Bitcoin in DC conference this week, and the amount of Bitcoiners trying to get me to buy Bitcoin, just a little bit. You only need a little bit. I'm like, guys, no.
Really? Come on. It's
You
not
know,
Independence at its finest. Yeah.
maybe
Well,
one day.
So Miller, on that note, I want to ask you, I guess, more broadly, and I think we've talked to Kristen, your colleague at SPI about this too. Like, SPI seems to be growing very rapidly. The Solana ecosystem is growing very rapidly. How do you guys think about growing your impact in DC? And I think also I want to ask you about the origins of more direct impact, because I know you've been involved. Obviously, you came from DeFi Education Fund, been involved with a lot of the trade associations here to go out and do your own thing and then grow so quickly. Like, how have you guys handled that, and how do you think it's going so far?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when we started the organization, we had a pretty good idea that we wanted a small team to get up to speed quickly, but we're up to 7. Our new GC, Patrick Wilson, joined on Monday, so it's good to have him. But with any new organization, of course, it's a new team. You have a new flow among colleagues, and it takes a while to get into that flow. So there's certainly challenges with being a 6-month-old organization, but I think it's been all at the same time. Crypto policy is going absolutely nuts in Washington. Everything happening all at once. So all of that considered, I think we're certainly making an impact and have been able to do so on a relatively speedy basis. I think the experience of going from one of the things that attracted me about this job and this organization is that I love DeFi. I'm like a DeFi guy at heart, but I like a lot of other policy issues in crypto too. And it is certainly a privilege to be advocating on behalf of an ecosystem where literally everything is going on. There's been a range of issues I didn't even think about being crypto issues that have been on our docket this year. So it's been really exciting. It's been very educational. We've learned a lot, and I hope that other folks in the in the industry more broadly, follow our lead to the extent they think it's been successful. Because, I think one of my main takeaways from 2025 is that there is so much opportunity right now in crypto in DC, right? Every agency is focused on this. We're about to be implementing the Genius Act. The SEC has a robust crypto agenda. The CFTC is working on it too. And I think as an industry, just don't have the bodies, the knowledgeable bodies to take advantage of that opportunity to the extent we could. So I think, 3-4 years ago, there were like 5 people doing this in the world, or at least in Washington. So I give ourselves some grace, but I do think one of the things we need to be focused on as an industry is broadening engagement in Washington, such that we can seize these opportunities when they arise again in the future.
Miller, you were the CEO of the DeFi Education Fund before starting SPI. You mentioned you're a DeFi guru. I was on the Hill yesterday, and I had a couple of coffee meetings with some congressional staffers of some DEM offices. And they were telling me that, the sticking points here are really going to be, one, the ethics clauses. And I say sticking points, I mean, I don't think it's the hill that they're going to die on, the ethics clauses, but, to quote Kristen Gillibrand, they've been trying to get, ethics provisions into like every single bill for the last like 20 years and they've failed, but why not try for this one? So I think they're going to push for it, but probably not the hill that they're going to die on. But this DeFi conundrum is going to be a tough one, right? You've got the Elizabeth Warrens, you've got the Mark Warners. Mark Warner's obviously on the Intel committee. I'm curious to know how your conversations at SPI and your meetings with staffers and with members are going on the DeFi front, because as I'm sure it's probably going to be a battle over that. The implementation of DeFi and how they're going to regulate it and how much are they going to regulate it in the upcoming battle for getting clarity through.
Yeah, I 100% agree with your assessment of the situation. I think DeFi has always been challenging because it's so novel. Similar to how Bitcoin, is attempting to use software to allow people to engage in activities that previously required financial intermediaries with respect to payments. DeFi is doing that for everything else, and it is just a completely new paradigm. And the government broadly, governments around the world have been very reliant on financial intermediaries to accomplish their policy objectives. When those intermediaries don't exist, it blows up the approach that we've taken to financial regulation for several decades. And therefore, that's what excites me about it. It's such an interesting issue. It's a new way to do things. But that means we have to approach it from a different policy perspective. It has been quite a challenge to expand the tent with respect to people that think the same way I do on this front. Eleanor, I will say we are light years ahead of where we were in 2021 when we formed the DeFi Education Fund. At the time, I don't think anyone in Congress knew what DeFi was. Senator Gillibrand, I think in 2022, was the first member of Congress to say DeFi in the congressional record, which I remember being excited about. And it proves your point, Eleanor, because it was in the context of how to approach DeFi in the Digital Commodity Consumer Protection Act, DCCPA. The exact same DeFi questions were at issue in late 2022. And it became a central debate within the bill. I remember on Bankless, SBF and Eric Voorhees actually debated DeFi regulation in the DCCPA. So, I don't think any of this is new. It's just that there's 10,000, 15,000 people in Washington that play some part in legislative crafting. And I think we've made a lot of progress on informing some portion of those on DeFi, but we've got a lot more work to do.
Yeah, Miller, I think we're talking about all this history and all this years ago, this ancient history in crypto. I think it's one of the more poorly kept secrets that you are one of the youngest old men in crypto policy in DC. You kind of, I mean, you basically started out here, right? And you've really kind of seen everything. I won't have Eleanor and Jackie guess your age, but it's been interesting, obviously, to have you go through this journey. I was having a conversation at dinner the other night about basically like the alternate reality if FTX had not collapsed. And so I'm really curious about going back to that debate and the influence that SBF had in the industry and you kind of being around the table at that time. What do you think, if we could just like fun sort of thought experiment it, like what do you think would have happened to the industry if that legislation had actually passed? I mean, obviously we wouldn't have the backlash that we did, but it probably would have been a very, very different environment.
Yeah, I at the time was opposed to that legislation because I viewed it to essentially prescribe DeFi development in the United States. And that's why the DeFi treatment in that legislation became an issue. And I'm thankful it did. So I don't think we would have been better off if that bill passed, but I obviously think we would have been better off had SBF not done his thing.
Yeah,
right. I think that I think legislation's always tough. I think that's more about timing and opportunity than anything else. What I do think would have been different is we would not have had a whole of government attempt to shut down this industry in the United States. If you remember, Gary's war really picked up after the FTX implosion. The banking regulators, a few months after the FTX implosion, put out their guidance that initiated Operation Choke Point 2.0. I think it also had a massive impact on the industry's broader reputation among society and the business community. So I think it was uniformly negative, obviously, and I think it's difficult to appreciate the impact it had. I think that uh, you know we would have been probably 5 to 10 years ahead as far as the development of the industry in the United States is concerned had
Mhm.
it not happened.
Yeah. Miller, we're almost at the top of the hour, but I also know that the Solana Policy Institute launched a Protect the Builders campaign the other week, and we had Roman Storm on the show. I was wondering if you had any case updates on that front before we let you go. You got to give us something.
So they're doing some post-trial motions at the moment. So the district court is closing up whether the judge essentially overturns her own case or the case that she oversees. Hope springs eternal, but I don't expect that to occur.
Mhm.
I think uh, the ideal outcome here is President Trump pardoning Roman. I think that the verdicts and lack thereof on count two proves that the legal theory underpinning the conviction for unlicensed money transmitting was incorrect. So I think the ideal outcome would be President Trump pardoning Roman Storm. I think that Roman's position, his counsel's position, is right on the law. I think that would be vindicated at the Second Circuit. So to the extent he isn't pardoned, I do think on appeal he'll win.
Yeah, I guess we're going to have to see on that front. Miller, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure, and we'd love to have you back. I think I
Thank
could
you for
speak
having
for the
me.
hosts. Yeah.
It's an
Absolutely.
absolute pleasure. Yeah, it's good to be on.
Good to
Yeah.
see you. See you on the train.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Next time. Yeah.
Wait, so you do guys like live near each other, Gerald? Then is that why you guys always see each other
It's
on the
just
train?
always it's the corridor, man. Yeah, we're at like Acela. I think we didn't ask him, but there's a big conference on Monday, New York. So all of the lawyers will just migrate up, and then we'll all hang out, and then we all migrate down. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
The transition. Yeah.
I was thinking with Roman Storm too, if they're because there's provisions in Clarity right now. I don't know if they're going to stay in or not, but to like update 1960, right, which was without getting like too technical, was one of the charges that Roman was accused of was it was money transmission under Section 1960. I believe it was B1C, but that was the charge he was convicted on. But basically, if Clarity gives some daylight around that and somehow is allowed to like retroactively repeal what happened with the tornado case, then like I guess the judge would have no choice but to drop the case. Is that right, Gerald? Is that possible?
Yeah, so this is where in the US we have this idea of mootness. So basically like if you're being charged with a crime and that thing is no longer a crime, then the issue is moot. They can find something else to charge you with. They just can't charge you with that anymore because it's not a crime. So for Roman, I think obviously agree with Miller that a pardon, especially given some of the pardons that we've seen, should be on the table. For this administration. And then, I know. So shout out to, DeFi Education Fund, the work they're doing there. They did a great sort of briefing update earlier this week. And they were talking about kind of all of the problems that they had with this initial trial and what his counsel was gearing up to do. So definitely not over there. But, I think kind of a waiting game for him at this point.
Yeah. That would be wild if like Clarity passes and all of a sudden like that dictates Roman's case and like he's free.
Literally.
That would be crazy.
Yeah. Is he on house arrest now, or where is he? Do we know?
I believe he's back on house arrest in Seattle. So he's still able to do all the things he was doing before. But yeah, they're just a bunch of paperwork and then they're not allowed to retry. It's unclear right now whether the government's going to come back and say, hey, we want to do another trial on the 2 counts that the jury was hung on. They're kind of putting that on hold right now until they figure out, what's going on with the charge that that he was actually found guilty on. So we should know more in the coming weeks, I think. But by the way, I do want to come and congratulate on our 8,000 viewers right now, or say hi and shout out to our 8,000 viewers, and thank you all for joining in and spending your Friday afternoon with us. It's super exciting. Thank you.
Feel free to reply in the comments and let us know the types of things you would like to hear more about, questions you guys have. Obviously, we appreciate all of you. And happy October.
Yeah.
Happy October.
Awesome. Amazing.
All right. Well, we will probably leave it here for today, but we'll see you guys same time, same place next Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.